All right. So again, I want to welcome everyone to our last Speak Out Nebraska of the 2023 legislative session. Speak Out Nebraska is a program that we provide without Nebraska to help you all know what's going on within the realm of the legislature, to track bills that impact the LGBT community of Nebraska, and learn what you can do to get involved, what you can do to advocate for yourself and the community at large. My name is Aaron. I'm the community organizer with Out Nebraska. We have a number of the Out Nebraska staff on here as well. What's very special about our last Speak Out Nebraska of every session is we let our intern, our policy intern, give it a go. It's a project that Audrey has been working on for the last few weeks. And so we're really happy that she's joined us for this whirlwind of a session. And this is the final exam of her internship, I guess you could call it, or the last celebratory go around. So I'll pass it off to Audrey to start.
All right, cool. Thank you for the introduction. Well, if you can't hear me, please let the chat know and we can fix that. And hopefully everyone can see the screen here. That's all good. Make sure your mics are muted and let's get started on the Speak Out Nebraska. All right, so agenda. First, we're going to go over the end of session and what that means for us. We're going to review all the bills that Out Nebraska has tracked, and of course, give you guys some election and voting information. And then we will end it with answering any questions you guys have. So first, I am the legislative intern of Out Nebraska. Audrey, Colleen, and my pronouns are she, her. I have loved this experience so much. It has been an honor to see what Out Nebraska does and what its volunteers have done and the advocates. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So great to see it, and I will take it with me for the rest of my career. Now let's go over the Nebraska legislature. So first, we're definitely going to want to review how are bills actually made? How do they become law? So with this beautiful little design, we can look and see that once a bill is introduced by a senator, it will be assigned to a committee. And in the committee, it could be advanced, held, or failed. Once out of committee, if advanced, it goes on to general file, which is the first round of debate. Senators can talk about the pros and cons of a bill. They can add amendments to change what's in the bill. Then, of course, it can be voted on, fail, advance. If it advances, it goes on to select file. Select file is the second round of debate. And again, senators will add amendments. They will discuss pros and cons, talk about favors, talk in favor of it or in opposition of it. And if it moves on, voted on, advanced into the final reading, it will be read and voted on again. It could be debated a bit, but amendments cannot be added in the final reading round. And if it passes final round, it goes on to the governor, and the governor can either sign it or they can veto it. Vetoes can be overridden by a vote in the unicameral, and if it's signed, it becomes law. Go on to the next one. Let's talk about end of session. This session ended on June 9th. So what does that mean for all of our bills? Let's look into it. We tracked 16 bills this session, and we had a lot of tough bills. Still, our community came together, and we continue our mission to make Nebraska more inclusive and more welcoming. So if you look here, there's a lot of information with these bills, but it's just a quick overview that we can talk about with it. As you can see, LB 277 advanced, but it has not been passed. This and any bills that were not passed or defeated will remain in their current placement for next year and then have the opportunity to advance or be defeated. And then bills we supported this session that we saw some traction on include LB 307. This bill establishes a clean syringe exchange program in Nebraska. It made it to general file. Again, this bill can be advanced next year. So we'll want to keep looking into these bills as it is the first year in the biennium for the unicameral. Notably, this session had a lot of bills get combined, also known as Christmas bills. With the filibuster that occurred, a lot of senators still wanted to get their bills in, so they worked together to combine their bills. And we saw that with a few different bills on here. You can see that with LB 626, it was a 6-week abortion ban that was defeated. However, it was added as an amendment onto LB 574, which unfortunately passed. We also had bills such as LB 630. This 630, a bill that protects Indigenous students' rights to wear regalia and protects all students from discrimination based on hair, hairstyles, head coverings, covers all of those things. And that bill was added as an amendment into LB 298, which was another bill addressing schools, and that bill got to pass and it was signed into law. Now for the highlighted bills, we're going to go a little more into the bills that had a lot of impact on this session that we put a lot of work into, that got a lot of coverage. So let's just get into that. First, we have LB 371. This was a bill that attempts to ban minors from drag performances. It did not leave committee, but it can still be advanced next year. But we had great turnout for rallies and for testimony. You can see in the picture in the top right, we have people serving beauty and brains. It was a great thing to watch, and people really stood up for it. Well, against LB 371. Then we have LB 575. This is a bill that tries to, it's also known as the Adopt the Sports and Spaces Act. It would prohibit trans youth from participating in sports and using facilities like locker rooms and restrooms that match their gender identity. Luckily, it has not left committee, but again, as this is the first year in a 2-year biennium, it can be defeated or advanced next year. So it is something we have to keep a lookout for. Then we have the big bill. This took up a lot of work for us. This was LB 574. First, it was introduced as a ban on gender affirming care for trans youth, and only a ban on gender affirming care for trans youth, which is still a huge and horrible thing. But in testimony for the hearing, we had so many people come out. They spoke their truth, they had their voices heard, they contacted their senators. Everyone did a lot of great work for that. Later on, this bill, LB 574, became modified to include a ban, a 10-week ban on abortions. And this bill did pass. However, we put a lot of work into this and we saw a lot of people fight against it. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh started a filibuster to stall LB 574's progress. Senator Hunt and Frederickson did a lot of work, and the Out Nebraska team, advocates, volunteers, we all worked very hard against this bill, and the fight does not end for that. We can remember the words of Lizzo on this. These laws are not real. You are what's real, and you deserve to be protected. We can all remember that. On a lighter side, we also have some good bills that passed or advanced. LB 630, we talked about this before in the first one, protects natural hairstyles and religious garments in schools. Again, this was added to LB 298, and it was signed into law by the governor on June 1st. Then we have LB 169. This is a bill that prohibits discrimination based upon sexual orientation and gender identity. It has been brought before and it has been brought again. In this year, it has been left in committee, but we have next year to advance it and bring it into law. So we'll be working on that. Let's talk about post-session action. So with post-session, make sure you contact your senators. You can thank them for the work they've done. You can let them know what work you want to see. And for contacting your senators, easiest way to do it, go to the unicameral website. You can search their name, go onto their landing page, click on it, and it will give you their phone number, their email, mailing address. You can get all that information. If you don't want to just search unicameral, Google their name and it will come up. You can find a way to contact them. It works well. And of course, election and voting information. We want your voice to be heard, and every vote counts. So let's go over some information to make sure you have those resources. Here are some links for finding your polling station and how to register. And on the next page, you can see a bunch of different resources for election information, for voting. There are luckily a plethora of resources to use. Search whatever you want, use Nebraska registration, Lincoln Journal Star. There is information that will keep you updated about local elections, the upcoming presidential primary election this spring. Just stay updated on it, and there's a lot of resources to help you do that. Okay, I went over that pretty quickly, but if you guys have any questions, we can start on those. And of course, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Check out our website. It's a great website. Johnny does great with our comms, but any questions?
Thank you, Audrey. Somebody did have a question in the chat. This is Abby. And so I want to go back and pick up that question, and then we can open it also to other questions. Someone inquired whether there's discussion about bringing back the drag bill. And there was discussion about that actually during the session when Senator, I believe it was Halloran, attempted to amend the drag ban into a justice reform bill or set of bills. And it was sorely defeated in that effort. It is still, the bill itself is still in committee, and so they may try to bring it back. But I think it will stay in committee. It was never they never had an executive meeting on that particular bill because the committee chair last year did not feel like it was worthy of a vote. And so we feel fairly confident that that one will stay in committee. So yeah. But we'll be vigilant in case it tries to come out. We'll be active again. A similar bill in Tennessee was struck down. And so we are hopeful that our senators will see that, you know, if it comes out, it will likely face challenges. And so we're hopeful that they will just let it die.
For questions here at the end, also, if folks either want to use the chat or if you can use the raise your hand function, that would help us organize answering questions. While folks are kind of thinking back over what happened this session and any lingering questions you do have, if we could have our Out Nebraska team just do a quick round of introductions with your name and position. That'd be cool. So folks have a couple of names and voices to the emails they get from us sometimes. Again, my name is Aaron. I'm the community organizer with Out Nebraska, and I use they, them, or he, him pronouns.
Awesome. I should have done more of an introduction when I started to talk, but I'll do that now, Aaron. This is Abby. I use she, they pronouns. I am the executive director of Out Nebraska, and really honored to lead this team.
I can go next. I'm Johnny. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the communications manager, so I handle all of the social media, email, press stuff. So yeah, I'll pass it off to Paige.
Hi, I'm Paige Schroeder. Pronouns are she, her. My Wi-Fi is a little spotty, so I'm just the development manager at Out Nebraska, and Audrey, I just wanted to tell you that you did a great job tonight. So that's all.
Let's go ahead and answer Shannon's question in the chat, and then we'll come back to you, Mary. So Shannon asks, did they add a grandfather clause to the anti-trans bill? If folks aren't familiar with what that phrase is referring to, is basically a clause to try and like allow people, in this case, to continue the care they're already receiving. Yeah, I was trying to think of a more explanation. So in LB 574, it will allow, as it's currently written and as we have mostly interpreted so far, people who have started gender affirming care, started receiving it before October 1st of this year, will be allowed to continue the gender affirming care they're receiving through the age of 19. For folks under 19 who have not started gender affirming care, there are unspecified rules that they will have to follow to access that care. We're not sure what those rules will look like. What we do know is specific gender affirming surgeries are not allowed. Hopefully that adds explanation. Abby, did I leave anything out to that? Okay. All right, Mary, what is your question?
Well, I just want to raise the whole issue of Merman's bill and what he calls parent responsibility for removing materials from libraries and classrooms that will very likely be related to LGBTQ and racial diversity, which is what's happened in other states. As a retired librarian, that issue is particularly troubling for me. And I wondered, I don't suppose there's any way of knowing, but with Merman chair of the Education Committee and that bill coming out of the Education Committee, I think it's one that we need to be prepared for.
So for folks who are wondering, what bill are we talking about? The bill we're talking about is LB 374, and I'll put a link in the chat if you'd like to read the bill. It is referred to as, or its one-line description is Adopt the Parents' Bill of Rights, an Academic Transparency Act. It's a very long and wordy title. It has not advanced out of committee, which is fortunate, because all the concerns that Mary has is the concerns we had about the bill, allowing one parent to really make education very difficult for teachers and students. This kind of got glossed over in a lot of things happening this session. There was another bill dealing with parental rights and education that did advance out of committee. That was Senator Sanders' bill. I want to say it was 81 or 71. The hope is that that one is more of a moderate take on things, and it officially codifies things that are already in place in a lot of schools for reviewing materials. So we are hoping that LB 374, Merman's more atrocious bill, doesn't advance next year. Though, yes, you're right. With Merman being the head of education, it is a concern that we will see more curriculum censorship and more interference in education and in libraries. So yes, adding some context for the people who are like, what bill is that? Because a lot has happened this session. Sam, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. So with LB 574, one of the things that was mentioned during debate was that there would be potential legal challenges to it if it was voted through. Has Out Nebraska heard of any legal challenges being mounted, or do you know of like what the timeline would be for those legal challenges to come up? Anything like that?
I'll take that one, Erin. This is Abby. ACLU Nebraska has already filed one suit on the grounds that the bill does not, that is unconstitutional based on the single subject rule of the Nebraska state constitution that states any bill passed by the body must be of a single issue. And so the fact that the abortion ban was added so late in the process is viewed as adding a different issue to the bill to garner more votes, which is specifically unconstitutional. And so they're already have that place or that case in place and are working through it. It will take some time. We expect that there will be additional challenges, but we can't really speak to the timeline of those. There are different requirements to show harm and things like that. So it may take some time for any additional lawsuits to be filed, but you can have more than one suit on a bill at any time. And so, yeah, that is moving forward. Hopefully, does that give you a little more information, Sam?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I have also put in the chat, you can learn more about the ACLU of Nebraska's lawsuit from their statement on their website. That's probably going to give you the most comprehensive look. And then I know local newspapers like Lincoln Journal-Star, Omaha World Herald, Nebraska Examiner also covered the lawsuit being filed. So I encourage you to see also, you know, what has been put out in your newspapers. I want to loop back. Shannon kind of asked a follow-up question. We were talking about what individuals and families have to, well, really families in this case, have to do to access gender-affirming care for trans young people. If they do not start gender-affirming care before October 1st of this year. It is a little complicated, so I will talk at the high level. And if you have more questions, we can see if we can get a little more nitty gritty. But the way it was passed and the language that was passed, come October 1st of this year, anyone looking to start gender affirming care when they're young, under the age of 19, or starting gender affirming care as a family decision, they will be subject to rules that would be determined by the chief medical officer of Nebraska, who I believe is confirmed or had his confirmation hearing recently, and I'm not sure where the status is on if he has been confirmed to his position, but yes, so he would be responsible for determining if there are any therapy requirements as far as mental health, have to be responsible for letters of recommendation, other sort of parental involvement. I don't have the bill up in front of me and I probably should have grabbed it before I started talking, but there were like 4 requirements that he will have to write rules about. There's just no check on how those rules might look or who gets to decide if they were enough or not enough, or if they were too cumbersome. Yes, if you watch his confirmation hearing, it was a big discussion of his, my words are failing, you know, of how qualified he was to make those decisions. Yes.
Language can be hard. It's okay. He did say that he would listen to experts and bring together a coalition of people. Whether or not he will follow through with that remains to be seen. There are some processes for input, but they're not as easy to track as the legislature. So we'll be really watching to see when and if we can continue to weigh in on that process. Yes, Shannon, you're speaking of Dr. Alex Dvorak, a very, very thoughtful and smart doctor who has offered to be a part of the process if he were to be invited. He is someone who does provide care and is thoroughly versed in the standard of care as they're written now.
And to add clarification, what I said earlier, the 4 rules that he has to develop have to do with the number of mental health therapy related hours in order to access gender affirming care, requirements for obtaining patient and parental consent, which is something you must do anytime you see a doctor, medical record documentation of need for gender affirming care, and a potential minimum waiting period. Shannon also asks, anything we can do in the meantime to not feel like we are in an inevitable losing battle? Yes. Because also in the grand scheme of things, we don't have to be in a losing battle, though it feels like that right now. There is so much potential for us to help turn the tides, to make connections in our communities, as well as to influence lawmakers. So things that you can do is, 1, you can start having these conversations with friends and family around you who maybe weren't following the legislature, and talk to them about what has gone on this session, talk to them about why you cared, why this meant so much, and why it hurt you and your family to see this happening. Or you and your friends, your community. 2, you can also, start now. If you haven't gotten a chance to contact your senator about everything that's happened, there's nothing to say you can't contact them now. The off session season, a lot of senators are twiddling their thumbs, hoping and praying that they'll get to talk to a constituent. You can quote me on that. But seriously, like, a lot of them, they have a lot more free time to speak to constituents. So it's a good time to reach out and ask for more clarification, or write them a note about how you felt this session went. And as always, getting involved with your local, yes, many of our senators I know are difficult to speak to. But it's also a good time to get involved with local organizations, both out in Nebraska as volunteering, or following along with things that we're doing, but also seeing who's active in your community, in your city. Are you involved with a local PFLAG chapter? Is there a local PFLAG chapter in your area? Is there another LGBT organization in your area you can connect with and get involved with? So that would be my 2 cents. Abby, do you have additional things that folks could do between now and next session?
Elections are incredibly important because our elected officials work for us. And that's why it's important to build a relationship with folks who are already elected, but also just to be sure that you are engaged and educated as elections approach. There will be a number of issues that are important to understand, and some of our legislature will be up for re-election. So it's just important to talk to people about being an educated voter. Yes, and there are lots of opportunities to volunteer. We have monthly drop-in hours. We have other projects that people can help with. We'll be doing lunchtime letter writing and other activities that Erin organizes. We would love to organize in other cities so that if we're doing drop-in volunteer hours in Lincoln, maybe somebody in Hastings is also hosting drop-in volunteer hours with projects that we send along. So there are lots of things happening. And yes, our community calendar is not just Out Nebraska events, it's events from around different communities that are welcoming and affirming. And so there's like maybe some drag events or some events at different churches or at art galleries or things. There are several different queer choirs, and so their events are up there as well as Pride events. So yeah, lots of things, and allies are welcome at Pride. So get involved in ways that feel good for you. Any other questions?
We also can come off the recording if there's anything you'd like to ask off of there, but I'll give folks one more, like Abby said, one more opportunity to ask something, and then we will stop the recording and, you know, shake hands. And thank you all for coming. All right. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. I'm going to do a little farewell on our recording, and then we'll have an opportunity to have more conversation if needed. Yeah, thank you all for riding with us through a very hard session, and for every way that you have spoken up and that you've been involved and engaged this session, whether you've been able to come to the Capitol, whether you've made calls from home, whether you've just told your neighbor what's going on. Every little bit has really, really mattered, both to us as an organization as well as our community. And I want to have us all give a big round of applause to Audrey and all her hard work as our legislative intern this year. We could not have done everything we did without your help. From this presentation, the other projects you helped with tracking all these bills, your help on LGBT Legislative Day, everything was greatly appreciated, and we're so lucky to have you.
Thank you, Audrey.
I just wanted to share that I was just at a state assembly for the Lutheran church that I belong to in Kearney. And there was a lot of conversation and very supportive kinds of conversation about LGBTQ issues. There are certainly, when people were providing support for the trans community in particular, there were clearly some folks who weren't real comfortable with that. They think they don't understand. They think it's a choice. They think lots of things that they don't understand. But the leadership is very supportive. And we had a speaker from the national church there who was speaking about chaplaincy kinds of issues, had been a military chaplain. But in the course of taking questions, revealed to the group. I mean, he was already out, but we didn't know he was an out person until he shared that with the group. And, that part was extremely well received, and people were very supportive. And he talked about that he's recently been appointed to this position at the national level. And he talked about the fact that when he went to speak to Bishop Eaton to interview, he said he thought, does she know? Because his wife, who he had lived who had stayed married to him for a while he had come out to her, when he decided to be public, she divorced him, and his mother turned her back on him. And so, obviously the emotion tied to that was difficult for him. But he came out then, of course, to the bishop, and she basically said, yeah, I know, what's that got to do with anything? So I think that my church has tried to, Our Savior's Lutheran has tried to be really supportive. And I think that by fall, we will be what's called a reconciled in Christ congregation. But right now, we're kind of at a point of wondering how best to let others know that we're there and safe in the community.
Yeah, I would say, consider a newspaper ad or like having a booth at an upcoming Pride. I believe Kearney is having a Pride this year. And so you may be able to get some volunteers from the church to have a table with you.
We're here in Lincoln.
Oh, you're in Lincoln.
We were
in
just
Kearney
at the
for the
meeting
meeting.
in Kearney. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So being at the parade on Saturday morning might be a good idea, in some church t-shirts or with a little banner as audience members to let people know. But yeah, a radio ad or a newspaper ad wouldn't go amiss, I don't think. You could host an event and invite the community to come in and just learn more. Sometimes people don't realize how supportive the faith community can be. And that's one thing that we saw during this session, is that we had a lot of organizing among progressive faith leaders, and that organizing is continuing, that congregations are continuing to do that kind of work. So yeah, I'm so happy to hear that your congregation's moving forward and that things are looking good for you. That's great.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And yeah, like Abby said, it's so important if anyone does belong to a faith practice, if your area is supportive of the LGBT community, speaking out can be really important of negating some of those hateful things we hear from other people of faith. So yeah. All right, again, we'll say goodbye now to our recording, and if you have any lingering questions, we can answer them. But thank you all for joining us, and we will end the recording now.